All right, folks. Very lovely to be here today. Thanks for joining us. My name is Bo. I'm from Able, BC. We are a professional lobbying group for businesses in BC, such as liquor and primarily now, or starting now, private cannabis retailers in BC. Today's panel is going to be about BC Farmgate and the cannabis experiences. And we're joined by a very lovely panel here today that I'd love to introduce. And I guess we'll start off with, we have Alana Davis joining us from Dabble Farms and also the co-founder of the BC Cannabis Alliance. We also have Stacey Duffy coming from All Nations, a 119 section holder. And I believe, Stacey, you're the director of retail, right? Perfect. And then we have, last but not least, the man, the myth, the legend, David Brown, who I think is, the co-founder of StratCan, but I think one of the most dedicated journalists that we have in our space in Canada for our industry. So before we kick things off, let's just give a hand of applause for our panelists there. Awesome. So to kick things off here a little bit, I think, let's do a little self-introduction about you and your business, especially, as it pertains to Farmgate in BC. Alana, you want to go first?
Yeah, so you guys heard a little bit about our farm this morning, but I'll kind of go into a bit more of what I'm looking to do. So right now we sell live rosin and edibles and soon to be beverages. And so in our Farmgate store space, I kind of envision having the ability to see into our processing lab, and so having that brewery type model where you can kind of see me pressing rosin back there while you're in the shop. This is theoretical. The shop does not exist on the property yet. It is in the dreams, partially because we're kind of protesting the price of it. I don't know if I'll get anywhere with that, but for the time being, it's not in reality just yet. But having the ability to serve people as well is a huge component to me about Farmgate. Is that I went over the challenges of dabbing, and so to be able to just have to go buy the product and then go consume it outside, taking a dab rig to go is not the most convenient thing. And there are devices that are coming along now which do make it a little bit more convenient, like Puffco has done a great job with that. But to me, like I mentioned before, the ultimate way to have our product consumed is with someone being served a dab. And so for me, consumption space as part of my Farmgate is kind of a core feature that I think that is missing right now in the regulations.
Yeah, thanks, Alana. And it's a perfect segue, actually, because Stacey, you guys have already, All Nations has invested into the PRS and it's already up and running. Maybe a little bit more about your business in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. So All Nations is a Section 119 holder, so meaning we operate seed to sale. So we have a vertical integration. Our facility, which obviously has products out in market, national and export. We also have our Farmgate retail as well that is on reserve. So Section 119 was kind of one of the very first lights into the Farmgate model, quote unquote, something that we wanted to see from industry-wide perspective, and our hopes was always to kind of create that full integration model where it's kind of like your winery, your Farmgate, your consumption space. You go here to kind of hit a destination and a cannabis experience, the real cannabis experience that I think we're all trying to establish. And so that was kind of our first go at it, was the Section 119 with our Farmgate retail store that's across the street from the facility. So that's who I am.
Yeah, go ahead, David. Thanks.
Well, did you have a question for me?
No, same thing, right? I think with your background in journalism, talking to so many different stakeholders across the country, seeing different models, right? I know you're very invested into the Farmgate program as well, but maybe share a little bit about what you've seen, or kind of if there's any angles there that StratCan would like to play in.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think, as an overview, BC, Ontario, and New Brunswick are the only three provinces that have a formal Farmgate program. BC's that Alana touched on, there's 3 licensed Farmgate stores, in addition to, I think, 2 of the Section 119 stores, like All Nations. There's another up in Prince George that is a Farmgate store as well. There's, I want to say, 3 or 4 in Ontario, and then there's 9. There are 9 in New Brunswick. One thing that StratCan has been doing that I think kind of ties into the Farmgate model here in BC, as well as what we're trying to do this year in New Brunswick, is trying to organize cannabis farm tours that bring people to a lot of the farms. And so we've done tours in the last couple of years. It's actually Alana's farm on the island has been one of the stops. We can really see how there would be an enormous opportunity there when there's a more robust Farmgate system in BC, to be able to essentially bringing not just the tourism dollars, but consumer dollars directly to the producers. So right now, when we're going to a farm, there's benefits for them, but it's largely it's a bit more abstract. If I can actually bring them customers where they can make some money, then it becomes really worth their while. And I think that is where we then start to see more effective cannabis tourism in BC.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Alana, you wanted to add something to that?
Yeah, I think that one thing that I wanted to mention is that, like, right now David's tours have to go from, like, to a retail location and then to a cannabis farm who doesn't have the ability to sell it. And so I think that sometimes people think that Farmgate is going to be a competitor to retailers, and of course there is the risk of that because you are selling the same products. But I think that there's a lot of opportunities for retailers and Farmgates to coexist, and for the Farmgate to be like more of a storytelling venue for your brand, because you're not going to ever get like a full store's worth of like displays and merchandise and things dedicated to your story. And so if retailers and producers are working together, it's like you can be driving people when they're visiting to their local store where you're carried, and it's a reciprocal relationship. They then can be sending people to go visit the farm, and then they're a more engaged dabble customer, and then they're going to want to like buy it at their local store when they're at home. I don't think that we need to look at it as like a competitive thing. I think we can look at it as like a supplementary and like a total growth kind of situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm actually glad you added that commentary, because I think from the retailer standpoint, what I can say is, I don't think they see it as competition. It's the same reciprocal relationship that you're talking about, right? Because we already see this existing in the liquor space, whether it's going to be wineries or it's going to be craft beer. Retailers want to have that volume, and the more branding, or really the more following a brand has, it really draws them in too, right? Actually, I want to switch gears a little bit to Stacy. From All Nations standpoint, first, as a producer, how has that additional retail revenue been able to kind of complement your overall business?
I think it's kind of been an interesting journey, I'd say, in the process here, because we are playing in a space that really hasn't necessarily found an established recognition in Canada and or BC. It's, as David had mentioned, there's a handful that you can probably count on top of your head that operate, and so it's not as robust as you would say in just the general retail landscape. And so we kind of operated in a way that we felt was leaning on both, because our Farmgate is across the street, so it's kind of on this main road, and our draw would be that we are Farmgate, you're getting product that is at your hand that literally just crossed the road this morning, and is freshly produced, and you're getting kind of the top notch, the cleanest stuff that you can possibly get. That draw is something that we really want to bet on, but we've, I think, found that cannabis consumers are convenience shoppers. Your regular public are people who are going to pick up their liquor, and then they're going to pick up their cannabis, and then the groceries, and then go home, or it's on their way to work and they pick it up on the way home. So I think trying to play into a market that we really want to build, and create destination spots where we're seeing tourism and a whole target market that's not your everyday local consumer, but it's somebody that is really interested in the experience that you're providing as a Farmgate. Until that's fully built out and is something like David's initiative goes in doing tours, unless we really can rely on that as tourism, you're really having a difficult time because most farm gates are really off the beaten path. They're not, in your local grocer. They're not going to be in major traffic areas. They're really going to be, and we all know, start of cannabis, we all kind of hid in the woods. So then now you have Farmgate, where you are able to, establish a retail store attached to your facility, but then where is your facility, right? And how can you draw that everyday consumer foot traffic every day that's going to continue to support your retail? So the long answer, I would just say, was that it's been really good for us because we've been able to understand the landscape of cannabis from all arms. We understand it from a licensed producer perspective, we understand it from a retail perspective, and from a farm gate perspective, and we really know what needs to be changed, established, and help the industry grow in a way that's going to benefit all areas, whether you're a regular retailer or you're a farm gate, that there should be enough piece of the pie for everybody, and that we don't have to feel like, your next door retailer is competing for the same wallet, which is what we're all struggling with right now. So.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I always try to put myself in the user experience. Like, what do customers or the patrons, or what are they experiencing? Can you walk us through right now, what's been effective? What have you been doing at All Nations to make that experience a lot more, fulfilling, right? Rather than just, it's just another store that I can just pop in.
Yeah, we have actively worked towards establishing facility tours and getting foot traffic through our facility and foot traffic to our stores, so people can see whether they're in the industry or partners interested in working with cannabis. They could see what the potential could be here. And we really leaned on our effectiveness in the mass distribution domestically. So we wanted to make sure that our product isn't just available at our store, but it's available everywhere, because we want to make sure that gets out there, that we're here. And so developing brand recognition and a sense of brand loyalty, because of the initiatives and the things that we want to establish as a brand, has been really worked in our favor, because people can connect with that. And so that's something that we've really relied on and has worked well for us, in terms of establishing a presence with the challenges and the non-challenges that we have.
Yeah, and I guess switching over to Alana here, actually, if I'm not mistaken, you've done a few events, actually, industry ones, at your farm too, right? What's been successful in those turnouts?
Well, what's been successful is honestly just being a place where people can go to gather and do something. So that's one thing that's really kind of missing from the landscape in Canada, is that there's not a lot of third place for us to go as consumers who are welcomed. The Amsterdam is probably one of the only examples really of somewhere where you can go pull out your dab rig or your bong and smoke and just kind of enjoy people's company. And so when I have our monthly sesh, the 420 church, it's just a community event, and we sometimes we'll have a soup competition, or a potluck, or I'll make burgers or whatever it is, and it's just kind of that place where people can come. And sometimes it's an educational thing where I have retailers come out and I'm able to kind of give them that brand experience and tell our story and talk about our products. But oftentimes it's really just more of sort of brand marketing the whole farm, and showing people that there's a place for experiences, and that we want to become a place where you come and hold your own experiences. This lovely lady here has approached me about maybe doing an infused dinner together, and that's great, because then the onus isn't on me as one person to try and put on all these events, because I just that's something that in the last year I've had to sort of pull back a little bit on events, just because there's so much effort and time and so much of you, but there's not really a ton of ROI on events and stuff. And so I've kind of had to pivot a little bit more and just focus on Dabble as a brand and selling it to the retailers and moving the business needle forward. And so I think that kind of looping that long-winded answer back is just to sort of like, what's been successful is having a place where people feel comfortable to come to the Airbnb and smoke, and they're not going to get kicked out, or, you know, come to our farm and gather with people who are like-minded and want to, you know, smoke together and meet new friends.
Just quickly adding on that we have a massive problem here that we all are struggling with, and it's the fact that we're not allowed to open the door directly to our consumer, so your general public, to rely on them for interest and revenue, because we can't market to them. Mm-hmm. So we are not seeing a ton of ROI in events because we're seeing the overall industry advocate, right? And then we kind of somewhat preach to the choir. We all know what the things that need to kind of change, and what it would make the experience for your average day consumer be better. But if we can't talk to them about it, then how can we generate traffic and generate interest? And the huge problem here is that if we can open that door, I think we'd all find a great amount of success where we're able to market and advertise in ways. I mean, Grey Goose has advertising in the, you know, in the Super Bowl, and we can't even put a sign up that says cannabis this way. So we're in this kind of competition where your general business practices that help you thrive and be successful, we're not allowed to use. And if we can advertise these farm gates and destinations and experiences and tourism that's coming off the bus to kind of come see what BC has to offer, and we're allowed to be in pamphlets that says there's cannabis tours here and this is what you can do, until we can do that, you know, we're kind of riding on the same bus with each other every day.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. And I think a lot of the earlier panels from today's summit touched on that a little bit. The 101's fundamentals of marketing is really not accessible to the industry. But I think it's amazing how we've been able to do so much with so little so far. A lot of it is word of mouth, right? So imagine the potential as these restrictions start to open up, how much more it could be. Because I think one of the panelists earlier was talking about the fact that there's so many different demographic segments of consumers, right? The guys who are in the industry obviously know what's going on, so they'll always turn out. But imagine if we open those gates to those that have always been curious or have been doing it, but just never been part of the regular ecosystem, right? And I want to turn this over to David, actually. I think given the experience with the StratCan tours that you guys have been doing, could you touch a little bit about the challenges and the marketing aspect of it? How do you get your word out about the tours?
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I mean, there are ways that we can do outreach. Well, you know, one of the benefits of StratCan is the platform that we have is already advertising to a lot of folks within the industry, and so that ends up being a lot of our audience for tours. Something we're really working towards, and I think we're sort of proving the model out right now with tourism and building it around different Farmgate stores and outdoor farms to get to the point where we can really bring in actual tourism dollars from other parts of Canada, other parts of the world, that is actual benefit not just to the businesses but to the communities where we're hosting these tours. And I think that's a slow, gradual process to get to that point. I do think we will continue to see the restrictions around that starting to lessen. I also think, there are certainly a lot of really challenging limits, but I see a lot of people pushing creative compliance, and I do think there are ways to get the word out there that can be effective. But yeah, when we're hosting a tour, for the most part, our attendees tend to be within the industry, either retailers, and I think there's a benefit there for the producers when we're coming because there's some direct engagement with bud tenders and ideally even higher ups at the retail setting. Sometimes there's some B2B opportunities because we're bringing other producers. I think one of our first tours, there was a supply deal just from one of the people that showed up and liked the outdoor crop that they were seeing. So there's a lot of opportunity there, but I think, the goal is to move towards a space where it's, truly reflecting actual tourism in the same way that you would see, wine tourism. To build on something Stacy mentioned earlier that I wanted to bring up is, I think, one of the challenges is BC has built their Farmgate system as, they call it a PRS, a producer retail license. What's the S for? Producer retail store. I think that's looking at it through the wrong lens. Farmgate needs to not be seen as a real retail store. It needs to be seen as something that ties more into tourism and could potentially be the kind of thing that you can open and close on a more temporary basis. One of the examples I often like to point to is what New Brunswick is doing. And there's two pieces there that I think make it much more affordable. BC1, as Alana touched on, has about $10,000 worth of fees just to get the license. About $7,500, I think, to apply, and then an annual licensing fee. But the other piece is that because it's a producer retail store, it's all of the same requirements that they require for a regular retail store. And there's understandably a lot of security concerns built into a standard retail store. So you can't just open a little trailer somewhere. And so the real cost is that extra $100,000 it's going to take to build your producer retail store when, as Stacy and Alana both touched on, you're often not getting that kind of consistent retail traffic to really justify that. And all the things that come along with that, your camera security system, your full-time employees, and then, the other side of it is a lot of these farms are out in remote areas where maybe they aren't interested in people just popping in. But it would be viable for them, on a seasonal basis or built into tourism. So I think that's one of the reasons why I want to say 3-4 years now into Farmgate licensing here in BC. There's just the 3 licenses. There's the first up in Salmon Arm, Shoecanna, right on the side of the highway. They should be well positioned for it. Victoria Cannabis Company, right in Victoria, also very well positioned in an urban area, right on a bike pathway. I think this summer will be their first summer there, and I think we'll have an opportunity to see, how much the tourism demographic plays into that. And now Weeds in Pitt Meadows, the third store, which is in a pretty interesting location, I think, for some tourism as well. So maybe we will start to see that uptick. But again, it's, if they can't pare that down and address some of those costs, I think all of the other things they're doing to sort of talk about tying that into tourism will fall flat because it won't be economically viable.
Yeah, thanks for that insight. And I came from the producer space too, and I know it's a heavy CapEx investment for a producer to already set up something, let alone invest into a dedicated retail space. It is quite a bit, and a lot of folks I've talked to they have a hard time seeing the ROI for that. Before I shift into that part of the panel where we talk about where things can be improved, David, I'm very curious, for your tours that you're doing, are you, to add more to the user experience, what are you doing also a little bit differently, I guess, whether it's on the buses or you go visit different businesses that may not even be cannabis? Let's say you also drop by for some munchies somewhere. What does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've done a few tours on Vancouver Island now. Like I say, Alana's farm has been our lunch stop both times, and she has an amazing space for that. So it provides that value opportunity right on the pond there. She's got this little outdoor kitchen. Allows us to bring in local caterers. We have often people on the bus who then give kind of a guided tour, who can talk about the history of the region through the context of cannabis. So it builds on the full sort of wholesome cannabis experience, I suppose, where again it can build on that idea of it being a broader sense of cannabis tourism that isn't just preaching to the choir and the same handful of industry people taking part, but actually bringing people in and helping them understand what these farms are facing, what they're experiencing. One of the tours we're looking to do this year on Salt Spring Island, we're looking to integrate one of their local retail stores that has a bit of a history there, and we do often tie it into, we start and stop at a retailer, so we often try to tie it into a retailer that is in some way connected with the theme that we're building. With the tours, we often focus on outdoor because there are sometimes challenges or risks with bringing in a lot of people to an indoor facility. So there's more opportunity when we visit an outdoor farm for the value add for them to go out into the field and take selfies. People really enjoy that.
Yeah, that's a good one. I came from quality assurance, so yeah, I can imagine the nightmare.
It's an understandable concern.
20, 25 different people I don't know just coming into the facility, and I got to clean up after them afterwards too. It's I can understand that perspective. Going into, I guess, the most interesting part of the panel, like some hard stats for everyone, right? So as far as a Farmgate, a legitimate one called a PRS license, we have like 536 stores in BC. I think there is only 3 total. That's a PRS, and this program has been around since 2022, actually. That accounts for 1% of the entire retail landscape. And interesting enough, Section 119 holders that are also in retail, also in that 1%, but actually slightly higher with 5 stores, actually, if I'm not mistaken. Alana, I know that...
5 PRS stores?
Yeah, 5 119.
119 stores?
Yeah, but it's still 1% of the whole market. So obviously those stats aren't encouraging. Alana, I'm wondering from your perspective as a standard cultivator on the island there, what are the variable factors that would help you decide to invest further into this space?
Well, for us, I mean, I could even justify a $7,500 application fee if I was able to leverage my existing site infrastructure. So I've asked the province, can I use my existing Dabble standard cultivation and processing license? I have a little office trailer in there. I said, can I leverage that space as my secure space and get an iPad where people come to my property and purchase it online, and then I just go into the space. I could bring them with me, or I don't have to. I could just go grab it, and I can just fulfill it and leverage the existing security and, you know, space or whatever. But the biggest challenge is that they say that they can't overlap jurisdiction, and that space, even though it's not a licensed cannabis production space that I'm talking about, they say that that's still not their jurisdiction to inspect, and it won't meet their sort of very strict criteria of what they want to see a production retail license look like. And then the challenge with that is that they've already invested the government's time and money into doing some engagement with the public and with the producers, and now they've got the license out there, and they kind of they're now working on other projects. And so for them to then reinvest more money to go like reevaluate that program has to get prioritized. And with their 1% adoption rate, they're thinking like, well, there's not a whole lot of demand here, clearly. So it's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy of not getting attention to this program when I'm begging to do a Farmgate store and not have to put up all of the expensive infrastructure, because I'm the perfect example of like all winter, I don't want random public strangers on the farm if I'm not prepared to like do a pop-up event on the Saturday maybe. You know, like I don't have the traffic, I don't have the capacity, like we want some downtime, you know, like we would definitely be a seasonal type of business. And so like summer weekends would be when we would operate type of thing. And maybe summer weekdays, but like maybe not even. And so to have to pay for the same and have the same infrastructure as a retail store when I'm going to be open like 10% of their time, it just doesn't make sense. And so for us, we've just sort of like created these kind of like, you know, working with a local retailer to like deliver the cannabis, or like, you know, get a little sort of like refer them to them. But it's just, it's clunky, you know. We want to be able to just give it to them on the farm, like where I grew it and where I packaged it. It just doesn't make sense. And so if Farmgate tourism, like if you're a person who would want to go to a winery, but now you smoke weed, like tell your government you want to go to wineries, and the reason, or sorry, weederees, but the reason that doesn't exist is because it's so expensive. Like, comes back to advocating for what you as a consumer want and telling the public, the politicians, anybody, how you want it.
Yeah, thanks. And I think I see the vision here. It's almost like you guys ever been out to Chilliwack and they have like Chilliwack corn and they just have those barns set up and you literally just go pick up, right? That's kind of what you're thinking. Yeah. So I think it's fair to say the recap is really the application fee is quite expensive for what it is to get it started. Some zoning issues there, and eligibility with the current PRS program. That's kind of, those are the kind of the top three in your mind.
Yeah, the infrastructure requirements.
Right. And Stacey, is that something that now that you guys have been in this space for a little while, you might have a different take, right? Because now you're actually operating in it and you're seeing different type of hurdles now in the operating phase. What do you see as improvements that's needed?
I think at some point we have to recognize that, regulatory challenges were all built on fear-based ideologies. And one of the major things that we really missed was considering that if you're going to allow access to cannabis, that means you have to allow access to spaces to consume cannabis. And if we're talking Farmgate, we're talking weederys, we're talking similar to kind of creating destinations. We really need to be able to establish places where, like the Amsterdam Cafe, that are available for tourists, for example, to smoke their weed. And what's happening is that, you know, you can do a facility tour, and then you can do, you know, your Farmgate tour, and they check out the store and they buy their cannabis, and then now they're standing in the parking lot and they've got this weed that they have to smoke, but then nowhere to smoke it. And so we're creating experiences where now they're, you know, on the sidewalk, by pedestrians and in places where it's really not ideal for you to want to be consuming, but it's your only real option. Or you go home, or you smoke it in your car, God forbid, and you find yourself in trouble. So it's like we haven't really created infrastructure for that or regulatory relief in order to be able to establish that. So in order for us to really find ourselves investing more into kind of the Farmgate model, we really need to see some clear established parameters that allow for public consumption and opening your doors to your average day consumer to want to come in and consume cannabis in a safe space where you have bartenders and you have people who can actually, you know, educate you while you consume, and you can learn more about what you are buying. And if we don't allow these places, what we're going to do is we're going to find other places to smoke, such as a forest, and then now we're a fire hazard. So you're giving people these like one option or the other, where really it could just be resolved by having legitimate places where you can advertise in tourist panels or tourist pamphlets, and people come to and they can buy their weed and have a tour, hang out, have some food, smoke their joint, or consume their, you know, THC drink, and feel safe to be able to do so. And when we can open those doors in a very clear and direct way, rather than feeling like we're Canada's dirty little secret that we have cannabis and we can't go anywhere to consume it.
Yeah, and that's a great point there. Like, I think in one of our panels last time, we were trying to express to the government, essentially, a lot of operators and owners are really just looking for certainty, a framework to work with. And it seems like the main takeaway that you're trying to express to the audience here today is that the PRS is great, but then it really should have incorporated that consumption framework as part of it too, for it to be fully successful in that sense, right? Because you're right, where are people going to consume once they get their goods, right?
Yeah, and if you think about when you go to a winery, you're really like buying into the experience, right? And it's you get to find out more about their wine, and you can taste it and test it and take one home with you. And people opt into that because they get to experience something different and cool. We want to be able to establish the same thing, and until you can do that, then the destination becomes way too far, because there's nothing beyond just what maybe your regular next door retailer can provide.
I think that with consumption space legislation, it has the opportunity, and like I almost had a vision when I was driving through to the Unicorn Music Festival, Rosebud Cup, whatever, last year, was that so many BC towns are like lost, and they're completely like everyone's moved away and there's no jobs anymore, and it's just like a little ghost town, and it's so sad. And I was like, I feel like cannabis and cannabis tourism almost has the ability or the potential to like reinvigorate so many little towns, because it's like if you could have like some accommodations that were cannabis friendly, and a grow and a store, and you know, a few things that you could kind of like do in the space, then it's like all of a sudden that creates like a whole bunch of jobs and a draw for tourism. And like that, when people come to your Farmgate store, if they're coming from like out of town, they're not just adding to the economy by buying your couple joints, but they're also, you know, filling up at your local gas station. They're getting a snack at the cafe. They're maybe staying overnight at a hotel. And all of a sudden that, like, you know, fucking $25 with a joint is like a few $1,000s for your municipality, and the like GDP that you're contributing, because they've come all the way to go to All Nations and like, you know, check it out and come to your town and do the thing. Sorry for swearing.
No, and I like the passion that goes behind our industry, right? Because I think at the end of the day, everyone's still trying to move forward, even though there's so many constraints. And I think speaking of constraints, David could probably add a few more perspectives to that, because again, David, given your background, you've talking to so many different stakeholders in the space, and I know you're very passionate about the PRS program as well. From your perspective, what do you see as whether it's like policy changes or regulatory hurdles that needs to change in that program?
Like I say, I think, to reiterate Alana's point as well, I think the infrastructure cost for the retail store itself, I think, is the biggest challenge. I think building the Farmgate model around how the actual, the demands that the actual license holders have, the PRS system as it exists somewhat makes sense for those locations that are in an urban area and can operate as, something much more resembling a retail store. But if you're a farm out in the middle of nowhere, $100,000+, probably much more these days, to build out a poured foundation store with all this extra security equipment in place, it's not practical, and it's not taking into account what their needs are. Like Alana says, she wants to be able to sort of roll up, the side window to be able to make those sales, on a occasional basis. And I think that's one of the same problems. I've talked to the guys up in Salmon Arm at Shoe Canna. They've talked about the marketing thing also being an issue. They're right on the side of the highway and yet feel like they can't really direct traffic to their facility. I think there's
They should just do it.
That's my advice as well. I think there's a lot of wiggle room there. But if there was a bit more help as well, so I think there's needs to be a recognition from the provincial government that, okay, we really overbuilt this a little bit. It's been a couple years now. We see, the other side of what Alana's saying is, if there's only 3 that have applied and 3 now licensed, that says that maybe you guys have, this isn't fulfilling what you set out to do with this exception. You've just kind of allowed a producer to build a retail store. Like that's not Farmgate, right? And like I say, if you look at some examples, New Brunswick, I'd love to point to because they don't have those restrictions. It's very easy to have a little trailer. They've got, StratCan has covered this quite a bit, so you can see some of the pictures we have on the website if you look up the Farmgate. And it's much more viable, and it's these remote locations where it becomes more of a marketing experience for those stores. It allows them to sell the kind of products that otherwise wouldn't maybe have a high volume, really small batch products that it doesn't make sense to go through Cannabis NB or any other provincial distributor. It goes back to the point that it's not necessarily competing with other retailers. It's providing a very different experience. And what I hear from pretty much any Farmgate store is it's about brand affirmation, right? You're building that experience so when the consumer comes out there, they're maybe paying a little bit more, but they're to support that and to understand I'm getting it straight from the source. And there's some extra branding that's happening there that's not happening when you're going into a store and it's just one of 500 products on a shelf.
PRS also has the opportunity, as does direct delivery to a degree, but to help resolve the THC crisis, where we're all focused on THC, because if those products, like David mentioned, aren't being accepted by the provincial governments, but they're sold at the retail store or the PRS, whatever, Farmgate, and consumers are like, oh my God, this like blueberry is such a nice smoke and like a really great effect. Oh, well, that's actually only 17%. And it's like, oh, wow. And then like maybe they see that that's a huge demand, and then that can kind of like be evidence for the provincial government to bring in the SKU, and like it's kind of like a bit of a pipeline of proving it.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I think the big thing is tying the emotional attachments to the product, right? That user experience. You had a great time. You were there with your friends. It was a nice summer, nice sunny day, and then they're always going to remember that one brand. So then next time they see it at their local shop, they're like, oh, hey, remember that one? That was a great one. Let's grab some more, right? But yeah, that's a great angle there, actually. And I think for our audience here today, we're running a little bit on time, but if you guys could take or offer one kind of takeaway for industry, and obviously all the stakeholders here today are focused on tourism and hospitality, what's your one piece of advice for the next step forward? What should we do in industry, particularly from that tourism hospitality angle? What's the biggest recommended action from each of you guys?
Well, I already told you to email your MPs and MLAs monthly, so you're already doing that, right? But I think that the flip side of that is actually to not necessarily be so careful with the regs. Be cautiously, creatively compliant with the regs, and honestly, like be rule breakers a little bit and rule benders where, we're going to put on an event or an infused dinner, even though there's no license to do it, like whatever, At this point, we need to sort of just like continue pushing forward on events and creating experiences. And that's how we will show that they can be safe and responsible. And Alexis does such a fantastic job at this when she does events. She actually like collects a lot of data and, presents like a bit of a recap to any government stakeholders. And so it's like showing that we can be responsible before they've given us the allowance to be responsible, So a lot of other kind of rule breakers in the room. And I just love to see, different consumption spaces and other sort of things that are maybe not explicitly allowed, but you're paving the way for us. So thanks.
I also think that's just an example. The successful businesses that I talk to tend to not hyper focus on what they can't do. You need a good, solid understanding of what the limitations are. But if you're looking for excuses to say I can't do this, that's probably the wrong perspective. And there are a lot of creative, compliant ways. There are a lot of ways to say I'm just going to do this anyway. I see advertisements for retail stores in my local newspaper. I see signs on the roads. So these people are either paying a fine or just getting away with it. So, I think it's important to the other side of I think what Alana's saying there is it's not hyper focusing on what can't be done.
My take might be a little bit controversial, but I think government sometimes just needs to butt out of business and butt out of agriculture and allow us to do what we do best without them babysitting. And I think the only way that I could really see is us finding a pathway where there's significantly less regulation and significantly less government involvement in the industry. And the moment we are allowed to do that, the moment I think we'll be able to really see this industry the way that we want to see it.
Preach.
Yeah, perfect. I think that's the time that we have here today, guys. But I want to give a round of applause to everyone. Thank you. As you guys can see, these are the folks who are fully invested into this space and wants to give it a go. Really encourage you guys to take any questions that you have or any networking opportunities. There's always an angle somewhere, I think, in tourism hospitality. But thanks everyone for everyone's time, and we'll get back to you in a bit.
Wait a minute. This is, excuse me, a damn fine cup of coffee. I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. Every day, once a day, give yourself a present. Don't plan it, don't wait for it, just let it happen. It could be a new shirt at the men's store, a cat nap in your office.